she whispered. You'll regret choosing me, the rancher smiled. I already regret waiting this long. Sometimes love isn't about perfection, it's about Tim. Angie, so now join me, let's dive into this beautiful estate. Ori. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty square, turning the town of Redridge into a golden haze. Wooden stalls cast long shadows, and the smell of sweat, leather, and dust mingled in the air. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring and shuffling as the auctioneer called out names and prices from a rough-hewn platform. Amelia Harper stood on that platform, her hands loosely clasped in front of her. Her dress was faded and patched, her boots scuffed, but her chin was lifted, her dark eyes sharp and unflinching. She was small, yet there was a steel beneath her fragile appearance, a spark that refused to be tamed. Going once, going twice, the auctioneer intoned, raising a hand to the crowd. Amelia's pulse quickened. She had seen this before, people treating her as if she were nothing more than a possession. She swallowed the lump in her throat and muttered under her breath, a warning and a defiance all at once. You'll regret choosing me. A wealthy-looking man in a black coat stepped forward, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. $10. She'll make a fine servant, he said, his voice carrying easily across the square. He laughed softly, amused at what he thought was her arrogance. Amelia's jaw tightened. She hated him for his certainty, for the way he assumed ownership of her life. Then from the back of the crowd a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, and calm, he walked with a confidence that made the dust crunch under his boots like a drumbeat. Ethan Callahan. He stopped in front of the stage, his eyes settling on Amelia with a quiet intensity. There was no pretense in his gaze, only certainty. $1, he said simply. A hush fell over the square. The auctioneer blinked, flustered. $1? Are you sure? Yes, Ethan replied, his voice steady and unshakable. The crowd muttered in disbelief. Some laughed, some shook their heads. Amelia, however, could only stare. There was something in the way he looked at her, calm, unwavering, almost as if he could see right through her defenses. She leaned closer, her voice a low, defiant whisper. You'll regret choosing me. Ethan's lips curved into a small, warm smile. I already regret waiting this long, he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. The gavel came down, echoing sharply in the square. Sold. For the first time in years, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Ethan extended his hand, and after a brief pause she took it, the warmth of his grip steadying her more than she expected. They stepped down from the platform together, leaving behind the murmurs of the crowd and the weight of her past life. The ride away from Redridge was quiet at first. Amelia kept her distance, eyes scanning the horizon, still wary of the stranger who had bought her freedom for $1. Why help me? She finally asked, her voice cautious. You don't even know me. Ethan's gaze remained forward, thoughtful, steady. I know enough, he said. Everyone deserves a choice. Some of us just take too long to see it. Amelia studied him, trying to read the man who had stepped into her life so suddenly. There was no arrogance, no greed, only a quiet determination that made her uneasy, and strangely, intrigued. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the dusty plains, the first hints of what lay ahead stirred in the wind. Freedom had a price, and trust was harder to earn than any coin. Amelia tightened her grip on the reins, her heart a mix of fear and cautious hope. For the first time in her life she wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, someone had come along not to own her, but to set her free. The wind swept across the plains as Ethan led his horse alongside Amelia's, the dust rising in lazy swirls around them. The sun hung low, turning the sky into a canvas of gold and amber, and the world seemed vast and endless. For Amelia, every mile away from Redridge felt like leaving a piece of her old life behind, and yet the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at her. She glanced at Ethan. He rode with the easy confidence of a man born to the saddle, his hat tilted low against the sun, jaw set and eyes forward. He said nothing, letting the silence stretch between them, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was deliberate. After a long stretch, Amelia broke it, her voice cautious. Why did you pay for me? $1? You could have ignored it. Ethan's gaze flicked to her briefly, then returned to the horizon. Some things aren't about price, he said. Some things are about giving someone a choice. Amelia's brow furrowed. Choice? You think I ever had one? Not until now, he replied simply. She stared at him, unsure if his words were meant to reassure or provoke. There was something in the way he spoke, honest, calm, unyielding, that made her wonder if he had ever had to fight for anything in his life. For a while they rode in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic clop of hooves and the whisper of wind through the tall prairie grass. Then in the distance a cloud of dust began to rise. Amelia's heart tightened. "Outlaws?" she whispered, more to herself than to Ethan. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Stay close." The figures emerged, rough men on horseback, faces obscured by scarves, rifles slung across their backs. They were moving fast, cutting across the plains with practiced precision. Amelia's hands trembled on the reins, but Ethan's calm presence steadied her. One of the men called out, a sneer in his voice. "Hand her over, Callahan. You don't need her." Ethan's hand rested lightly on the butt of his revolver, his eyes never leaving the lead outlaw. "She isn't yours to take," he said, voice even. The chase was brief but tense. Dust clouds billowed around them as Ethan expertly maneuvered his horse, keeping Amelia safe while matching the outlaw's stride for stride. Amelia felt her heart hammering in her chest, not from fear alone, but from the strange, undeniable trust she was beginning to feel in this man who had risked everything for her. Eventually the outlaws gave up, disappearing over a ridge as quickly as they had appeared. Amelia exhaled shakily, leaning back in the saddle. You're good at that," she said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Ethan allowed a small smile. "You learn a few things when you live on the plains. And you learn who's worth protecting." Amelia studied him, really looked at him for the first time. His clothes were worn but practical, his hands strong, his eyes steady and unflinching. There was a gentleness beneath the rugged exterior, a quiet resolve that unsettled her, and drew her in. "Why me?" she asked finally, softer this time. Ethan glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Because you deserve the chance to choose your life. And maybe, because I didn't want to wait any longer to meet someone worth it." Amelia's cheeks warmed. She looked down at her hands, gripping the reins, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She had never been spoken to like that before, not with honesty, not with patience. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of violet and rose. The plains stretched endlessly around them, wild and untamed. For the first time, Amelia felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to hope for in years. Freedom, yes, but also the faintest whisper of trust. And for the first time she wondered if maybe this rugged, quiet rancher was more than just her savior. Maybe he was someone she could rely on, someone who might help her find a life beyond fear. The sun had long disappeared beyond the distant mountains by the time Ethan guided his horse down the narrow trail leading to the ranch. A cool evening breeze swept across the rolling fields, carrying the scent of wild grass and cattle. The ranch itself spread out before them, a sprawling combination of sturdy wooden buildings, corrals, and fences stretching toward the horizon. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, promising warmth and safety. Amelia stared, taking it all in. She had known hardship all her life, but this was a life she had never imagined. The thought of it stirred something inside her, a cautious hope she wasn't sure she could trust. Ethan dismounted first, steady and sure-footed, then extended a hand to help Amelia down. She took it reluctantly, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. Her fingers brushed against his, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "You'll want to get cleaned up," Ethan said, his voice matter-of-fact. "The water's warm and dinner's ready. Then we'll talk about what comes next." Amelia nodded, her mouth dry, unsure what to say. She had expected freedom to feel liberating, but it felt strange, alien. She had spent so long surviving that she didn't know what to do with a life where she wasn't running or hiding. As she followed Ethan into the main house, she noticed the small touches that made it feel like more than just a functional ranch. Hand-carved chairs, a patchwork quilt draped over a rocking chair, a stack of well-used books on a table. It was a home, not just a property, and the realization tugged at something deep in her chest. Ethan led her to a small guest room, modest but clean. He handed her a towel and pointed to a basin of warm water. "Take your time. You've earned it." Alone, Amelia stared at her reflection in the mirror. She hardly recognized the girl staring back, dust-streaked, wary, but alive in a way she hadn't been in years. She washed her face slowly, letting the warmth of the water chase away the grime and the memory of redridge. When she returned to the main room, the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread made her stomach growl. Ethan was there, quietly preparing their plates. His movements were effortless, practiced, yet there was a gentleness in the way he worked, as if every action was meant to provide comfort. "You're quiet," he observed, noticing her hesitation. "Don't feel like you have to explain yourself." Amelia took a seat, studying him over the edge of her plate. "I'm not used to people doing things for me," she admitted softly. Ethan's eyes met hers, warm and unjudging. Then it's time you get used to it. After dinner, Ethan led her outside. The sky was ablaze with stars, and the ranch lay bathed in soft silver moonlight. He handed her a small saddle and gestured toward the corral. If you want, I can show you how to ride properly. It'll make working around the ranch easier. Amelia hesitated, but the trust she had begun to feel nudged her forward. She mounted the horse awkwardly at first, and Ethan stayed close, guiding her gently. He didn't rush her, didn't scold her for mistakes. With every step, every careful word, the tension in her body eased just a little. "You're patient," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Ethan shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Patience comes with living out here. You learn it when you have to rely on others to survive." Amelia looked at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "I've never relied on anyone," she admitted, almost whispering. "Then maybe it's time you start," he replied, his voice steady, gentle, and somehow full of promise. As they rode across the moonlit plains, side by side, the wind whipping through their hair, Amelia felt something stir inside her, a mixture of curiosity, wariness, and the faintest spark of hope. For the first time, the world didn't feel like a place she had to survive alone. And as Ethan rode silently beside her, she couldn't help but wonder if she had finally found someone she could trust, even if only a little. By the time they returned to the ranch house, exhaustion had settled into her muscles, but it was a satisfying tiredness, the kind that came from learning, from stretching herself in ways she hadn't dared in years. And in the quiet of that first night, with the stars watching from above, Amelia Harper allowed herself the tiniest flicker of hope. Perhaps freedom wasn't just the absence of chains, it could be the presence of someone who cared enough to give her a choice. The first light of dawn crept over the ridge, spilling gold and amber across the ranch. Amelia stirred in her small guest room, the warmth of the blankets still clinging to her. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she had slept through the night without fear. And yet, as she looked out the window at the wide-open plains, a gnawing unease lingered. Her past was never far behind, no matter how far she ran. By mid-morning, she had settled into the rhythms of the ranch, feeding the chickens, stacking firewood, learning the precise way to handle a horse, but a shadow still hung over her. She moved carefully, every glance over her shoulder a reminder that freedom had a cost. Ethan noticed. He had been watching her quietly for days, patient and steady, never pressing but never ignoring the tension in her shoulders. "You're tense this morning," he said casually, leaning against the stable door. Amelia paused, brushing her hands on her apron. "I've had things I need to worry about. People from my past don't just vanish." Ethan's eyes softened. "Then let's make sure they don't find you here." For a moment, Amelia wanted to laugh, a sound filled with disbelief. But before she could, the sound of hooves pounding against the dirt made her freeze. Dust rose on the horizon, moving fast and deliberately. "They're here," she whispered. From the ridge emerged a small group of men, rough-faced and determined. One of them, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, shouted, "Harper! Come with us. You don't belong here." Amelia's chest tightened. Her freedom, fragile and new, hung in the balance. Ethan moved immediately, positioning himself between her and the approaching threat. "Not today," he said, his voice calm but hard. Amelia felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to feel in years: safety. The same man who had bought her freedom was standing in front of her, unwavering, ready to fight for her without hesitation. The standoff lasted only moments. Ethan's presence, steady and imposing, made it clear he wasn't a man to be trifled with. The men exchanged uneasy glances and then, muttering curses, turned and disappeared back over the ridge. Amelia's knees weakened and Ethan caught her arm gently. "You're safe," he murmured, steadying her. She looked up at him, eyes wide, the walls around her heart trembling. Why would you risk yourself for me?" Ethan smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because I've waited too long to do what's right. And because some things, some people, are worth the risk." For the first time, Amelia let herself believe him. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper she hadn't yet named. Later that evening, with the sun dipping behind the mountains, they sat by the fireplace in the main house. The room smelled of wood smoke and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold fear she had carried for so long. "I haven't told anyone the full story," Amelia said quietly, her voice almost lost in the crackle of the fire. I was trapped, forced to do things I'm not proud of. People I trusted betrayed me. That's why I fight so hard, why I don't trust anyone." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle and grounding. You don't have to trust everyone. Just the ones who earn it. Amelia's eyes glistened. I don't know if I can. Ethan's thumb brushed against her knuckles. Then start with me. Slowly. I'll wait. She swallowed hard, heart pounding. For the first time she realized that freedom wasn't just leaving the past behind, it was allowing herself to be seen, to be vulnerable. And standing there, with the firelight dancing across his face, Amelia Harper understood that trusting Ethan wasn't a weakness. It was a choice. A choice she was beginning to feel ready to make. The day had started quietly, almost deceptively so. The plains stretched out in endless waves of gold and green, and the ranch hummed with the ordinary rhythms of work, cattle grazing, the soft clatter of tools, and the low murmur of horses in the corral. Amelia felt a fragile sense of peace, the kind she had rarely experienced in her life. But the horizon was deceptive, and in the Wild West, calm always preceded a storm. By late afternoon, dark clouds began to gather, rolling in fast from the western ridge. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the scent of rain. Ethan noticed the change first, squinting against the glare of the low sun. "Storm coming," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same calm authority he always seemed to command. "We need to secure the horses and the livestock." Amelia hurried to help, though she was still learning the routines of ranch life. As she tightened the corral gates, she felt a sudden, familiar unease, the feeling that danger was closing in, not from the storm alone. Then she saw them, a group of outlaws cutting across the distant plains, moving with intent, their dust cloud visible against the darkening sky. Amelia's pulse quickened. "They're back," she whispered, gripping the post of the corral. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Stay close. Trust me." The storm hit suddenly, rain lashing down in sheets, wind bending the trees, thunder rolling like distant cannons. Visibility dropped, and the plain became a chaotic blur of mud and motion. Ethan grabbed Amelia's arm, guiding her to the nearest horse. "Hold on tight," he shouted over the wind. Together they rode, mud splattering their boots and coats, the horses straining against the storm. Behind them the outlaws pressed forward, but Ethan's calm precision never wavered. He guided their mounts through narrow gullies and over uneven terrain, keeping Amelia safe while keeping one step ahead of the threat. Amelia's heart raced, fear mingling with adrenaline. I can't lose you," she yelled, the wind stealing her words. "You won't," Ethan replied, voice strong, unwavering. "Not now, not ever." Every jump over a muddy ridge, every sharp turn to avoid falling branches, drew them closer together, not just physically but in trust. Amelia's hand brushed against Ethan's as he steadied her horse. A jolt of electricity ran through her, and for a fleeting moment, the storm felt like a strange kind of liberation. Hours seemed to pass in the chaos. The thunderstorm raged and the outlaws finally gave up, disappearing into the rain-soaked horizon. Amelia and Ethan slowed their pace, both breathing heavily, soaked through but alive. Amelia's hands trembled as she dismounted, leaning heavily on her horse. Ethan was right beside her, steady and unshaken, a living anchor in the midst of the storm. You saved me again," she said, voice barely audible over the fading wind. Ethan looked at her, his face illuminated by a brief flash of lightning. "And I'll keep doing it. As many times as it takes." The storm began to subside, leaving the plains glistening with rain, the air fresh and sharp. Amelia looked at the horizon, the waterlogged grass reflecting the last streaks of sunlight, and realized something she hadn't dared admit before. She trusted him completely. And in that trust, something else stirred, something deeper, more fragile and far more dangerous than the storm they had just survived. She swallowed hard, heart pounding, and let herself lean just a little closer to him. Not just for safety this time, but because maybe, just maybe, she wanted to. For the first time, Amelia Harper understood that fear and love were not opposites. They could ride side by side, wild and untamed, like the plains themselves. The storm had passed, leaving the plains glistening with rain and the air crisp and electric. The ranch was quiet, save for the soft lowing of cattle and the occasional creak of a swinging gate. Inside the main house, the fire crackled, casting warm flickers of light across the walls and painting Ethan's face in shades of gold and shadow. Amelia sat near the hearth, drying her damp hair, still shivering slightly from the cold. She was exhausted, every muscle aching from the day's adrenaline, but beneath the fatigue was a strange, thrilling warmth, the knowledge that they had survived together, that he had protected her as he always did. Ethan moved to the rocking chair beside her, settling into it with ease. His eyes found hers, steady and unflinching, as if he could see right through the walls she had so carefully built around her heart. "You're quiet," he observed softly. Amelia hesitated, unsure how to speak. Words had always been her shield, but tonight, vulnerability felt necessary. She began slowly, "I've never had anyone look at me like that. Like I'm not broken." Ethan's gaze softened. "You're not broken. You're human. Stronger than most give you credit for. You just haven't had the right person beside you to see it." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to laugh, to brush it off, but something in the firelight, in the calm strength of his presence, made her pause. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she didn't have to fight alone. "I'm scared," she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Scared that if I let someone in I'll just lose them like everyone else." Ethan leaned forward, his hand reaching for hers. The touch was light, tentative, yet it sent a shock of warmth through her. "Then start with me," he said, voice steady, unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to be afraid." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, the first real release she had allowed herself in years. She shook her head, smiling through the wetness. I don't know if I can." Ethan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Then take your time. I'll wait. No rush. No pressure. Just trust that I'll be here." She let out a shaky breath, the walls around her heart softening for the first time. I think I've waited so long to trust someone, that I'm afraid it won't last." Ethan leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, his voice low and intimate. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And what we have, it is." Amelia felt the words settle into her, a warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that trust wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never being hurt. It was about choosing to be seen, to be known, and to accept someone in spite of the fear. The fire crackled between them, a comforting rhythm, and finally she let herself close the distance. Their foreheads touched, hands intertwined, and in that simple, quiet gesture, the tension, the fear, and the uncertainty of the past melted away. I think I like you," she whispered almost shyly, her heart pounding. Ethan's lips curved into a small, soft smile. "I've liked you for a long time," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, carrying the weight of honesty and promise. And then, at last, the world outside, the plains, the storm, the dangers, faded into nothing. There was only the warmth between them, the firelight, and the unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. Amelia Harper had learned, finally, that love didn't demand perfection. Sometimes it demanded courage. Sometimes it demanded vulnerability. And tonight she had both. The first light of dawn stretched across the ranch, painting the plains in soft hues of gold and rose. The air was crisp and clean after the storm, carrying the scent of wet earth and fresh grass. For the first time in her life, Amelia Harper felt the weight of the world lift slightly from her shoulders. She stood at the edge of the corral, watching the horses graze lazily, their manes glistening in the morning sun. Beside her, Ethan moved with quiet confidence, adjusting fences and checking the water troughs. He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips, and Amelia returned it, feeling something inside her settle, an ease she had never known before. "You've grown used to this life, haven't you?" he said, leaning against the post of the corral. Amelia laughed softly, the sound light and free. "I'm starting to. Strange, but good. I never imagined feeling like this. Say, like I belong somewhere." Ethan's gaze softened and he stepped closer. "You do belong. Here. With me. Not because I saved you, but because I want you here. Every day." Amelia felt her chest tighten, warmth flooding through her. She realized that this was more than freedom, it was a choice, a life she could build with someone who saw her, not as property or a problem, but as herself. They walked together across the dew-kissed grass, the silence between them comfortable, filled with mutual understanding. Horses stirred in the distance and the ranch hummed with life, a life that was theirs to shape. "I've learned something," Ethan said, his voice quiet but certain. "Sometimes love isn't about perfection. It's about timing. And maybe we were late finding each other. But we're here now." Amelia looked up at him, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Then I guess we were late, but not too late," she whispered, her hand finding his. They rode out together across the plains, side by side, the rising sun at their backs, painting everything in gold. Amelia felt the wind in her hair, the freedom in her chest, and the steady warmth of Ethan beside her. For the first time she understood that trust could grow, that love could survive danger, and that sometimes the right person comes into your life not to fix you, but to help you choose a life worth living. The ranch stretched endlessly before them, wild and untamed, just like their journey had been. But now they faced it together. And in that moment, Amelia Harper realized something she had never dared to hope. Sometimes the greatest freedom wasn't escaping the past, it was choosing the future hand in hand with someone who would stand by you through every storm. As they rode into the golden horizon, laughter spilling between them and the gentle nicker of horses at their heels, the plains seemed to promise something eternal: love, trust, and a life rebuilt on courage, patience, and hope. For Amelia and Ethan, the future was wide open, and for the first time it was theirs.